This time on shift points, this 37 Chevy gets in the floor and it's ready to go out the door. Wow, that rhymed. I didn't even mean for it to. All right, we are back. This is it's a new week, so we're kind of getting going on this deal. I'm off all this week, so we're gonna work our best to try and get this thing on the floor and rolling today, if at all possible. Where we're at working on this thing this morning is we're gonna go ahead and start building the plates that go on each side of the frame from where we ended up cutting the frame, and from where all these holes are in it, from where whoever's done whatever to it at this point. So Dad's already over here. He's working on building some templates out of cardboard. He's gonna use those to kind of get us ready. We're working on the outside frame rail right here. So that piece is gonna fit up in there roughly. You wanna set it up in there, Denny? So it's gonna look like that somewhat. We're working on trimming it all out right now as we go. So as we trim it, get that trimmed, figure out what we need to do. And we've got some, what'd you say, 14 gauge? What'd you say, 14 gauge we're gonna use on this?
Yes, 14 gauge.
So we've got a big plate of 14 gauge. It's actually laying over here in the floor. We've got this big plate of 14 gauge we're gonna make these boxes out of. That's gonna go on each side of the frame rail, like we talked about in the last video. And then that'll let us get all this cleaned up, all of these holes that are in the frame cleaned up, and then that'll kind of get us back to where we need to be. And at that point, once these are in place, that's when we can bring our fully assembled cross member in and get it welded up, tacked up in place. And then the main thing that we want to do is verify and make sure that all of this is in the center of the wheel. You know, we've measured, we've tried to double check, triple check everything best we can. But the number one way to do it is put the front end back on it and check it and see. Make sure that the wheels and tires are in the center of the fender openings, like we're trying to do with this. There's no reason why it shouldn't be, but again, that's the number one way to do it. Go ahead and put it in there, check it, make sure it looks good. So what we'll do, we'll tack everything in, we'll assemble the spindles and everything, set the front end back on it, put a wheel and tire on it, and check it, make sure everything's good. Then we can finally weld everything up and we'll have the front end all wrapped up. All right, so it actually worked out really great. It looks like one template is going to be able to do all four of the pieces that we have to make. We lay that template here on our sheet metal. We've got it marked out. We're gonna take Sawzall now and get this piece cut out here. And that should get us all the plating that we need. So you can see this is kind of what the final plate's going to look like. We went ahead and got all four of them cut out, got angles cut on them so that these can get welded in place here, so we don't have any straight welds like that. They'll be angled, make them a little stronger, a little more surface area there to have welded to. But anyway, we got all four of these cut out, shaped, mocked up, and we will go ahead, I don't know what we'll do next. I guess go ahead and get these welded in place. I'm going to quickly show you. There's this side, this one here, here, and then Dad's got the other one that goes over here. Again, the whole reason behind this is to make this frame rigid with everything that we've got to do to it, since somebody has went and cut and drilled a ton of holes in this side especially, and this is also to support that frame, that cut that we put in the frame to get the frame leveled up. So yeah, a lot of extra work here, but it's all paying off in the long run to make sure everything's really rigid and stout on this car. Alright, we're at the point now that we're ready to go ahead and get these upper control arm mounts welded up in place. Doug was reading the instructions for us, and you measure this width, which is 7 inches, and then mark the center line of that. So you're not looking to get that bucket right there in the center of the center line, but you want this piece of metal to be centered. So 7 inches, 3.5, that's what we marked, and that's on the center line that we've marked on the frame, and that's got us here. The one thing that we've run into that Dad's working on, I think now, is on the driver's side, this bucket had a big gap. The way it was made, there's a big gap between the frame and it. So he's actually going to, yeah, right here, there's a big gap here, and he just wants to get that a little tighter so that he can get it welded up more securely. So he's going to modify this one a little bit, and there's about a 1 degree difference between the two of these, and we're hoping after this modification it should get us about exactly the same, and we should make it a little better to weld. We took this piece of metal here and put over the buckets to make sure that they were, they were flat and then in line with each other. Now Dad's getting these buckets tacked in into kind of their final location. The plan today is still to take this thing, get everything tacked in place, and then get the front end set on it, get the wheels and tires on it, and make sure that everything is square and where it needs to be, and the wheels and tires are centered up in the fender opening. So that's still the plan here. Since we did our plating here on each side of the frame, our cross member is actually a little too big to fit in here now. So Dad's going to have to take and grind it and get this to where this will go in place. This distance he's got marked right there. He's going to take that off of each side, and then that make sure that we stay centered, but make sure that that'll go in like it's supposed to. And Alright, we took our jack stands, we got this guy in here. The kit calls for 3 inches from the bottom of the frame rail to the center line of this hole. So that's where we've got it set at. Everything is set up, it's in here. Now we're going to tack it in one place on each side, and then we're going to move this so that we can get our caster in it that we need. So that's the plan, get that tacked in and then move forward. So we're back working on this thing this morning. You can look at it and see here, these spring buckets have about 9 degrees of angle in them, which just feels like a whole lot. And then we put the lower control arm on it this morning and realized that if you look at this, it's maybe a little hard to tell on this, but the spring bucket up here on top is just too far forward. It doesn't line up with the spot for the spring on the bottom on the lower control arm. So you can kind of see they don't really align. And we put the same amount of angle in this, and we've honestly just we've got a little bit spoiled with the height stuff. And you don't have to, a lot of this stuff's already built into the height kits. So we're just kind of having to experiment with this a little bit, but we know that these are too far forward, so we're going to take and cut those out and cut the tacks off of them and figure that out. But this cross member, we put the same amount of angle on the cross member as it's on the spring buckets, and again, going off of the height stuff, looks like just too much. Looks like there's just way too much caster into this cross member. So we're going to cut these loose, and we're going to kind of do some figuring here and see if we can make this look a little bit better than what we're seeing right now.
This angle has to be parallel with this angle so the spring will sit straight between the two buckets.
After a pretty good amount of time figuring and thinking, and we took this cross member, loosened it, put a little less angle in it than there was. We've got the spring buckets in the same place that they were, and we started putting the front suspension together, upper lower control arms, spindle. Now the plan is to go ahead and get this thing, get a wheel and tire put on it, set it in the ground and just see what it does. Then probably set the front end on it too to make sure that the wheels are centered up in the fender openings like we want them to be. So that's what we're doing, getting this together. Had a couple little hiccups here, but in general, we're getting it put together. Alright, you guys got it, saw it go down into the floor. We get back here, and this is of course no motor, no front sheet metal or anything, but it definitely looks good. Front suspension looks good. I think it's all gonna do good. I think the next thing we're gonna do is get the front sheet metal in here, get it set on it, make sure everything's lined up in the fender wells, and see how it sits there. Heavy?
Yeah.
Well, you guys saw us set the front end on it and everything. Man, it looks great. Doug is just tickled to death with it. It sets really good. This is of course going to be lower once the motor goes in it, but man, it sets really good right now. I'm trying to get here where you can actually kind of get a good shot of it. There we go. You can kind of see how that's going to ride. It's going to look great. Like I said, with the motor in and everything, it's going to lower it quite a bit there in the front. It's going to look awesome, I think. So it sets great. So now that all that's done, everything's mocked up, the other thing that we did check, and you guys saw it on that side view, the wheels and tires do set right in the center of these fender openings, so that is really important to the looks of the car, of course. We'll check this other side real quick so you can see that. Really important. It looks really good there. So now that that's all there, we'll bust this thing back apart, and then we will get everything welded back up. So we got to get all this, got to get all our plating, all the cross members welded up finally. We wanted to check all this before we solidly welded anything in place. So all that's great, and I guess we'll get back on it here in a couple days. My brother-in-law is bringing his Legends car up, so we're going to work on that a little bit for the next few days. You guys will probably see that on social media. This is going to get us there. We'll get this thing welded up here in a day or two, and once that happens, you guys will see it. So you can hear in the background here, Dad's already started welding up the front end on the old 37. We got it put back in place after we worked on Tyler's Legends car and got the front end jacked up. He's just kind of welding up the front cross member. The plan is to get that cross member welded in, then we can cut out the old one, and then we can work on marking and cutting the C-notches for the rack. Once we do that. So this kit came with some prefabricated C-notches, so we'll be able to use those as a template and mark the frame where we need to, and then we can just cut the frame and weld those in place, and we'll have this thing back on the ground and it'll be ready to roll out of here. This has been a pretty good little project. When he gets done welding, I'm going to talk you through a few little things that we saw that kind of threw us off a little and made us like 5 times check our measurements or more maybe. So when he gets done with this, I'll show you guys what we got into there. So when we got to looking at this, you can kind of see we checked square and looked at everything as much as we could, but you can see this distance is drastically different than this distance. And actually, when we went to put the control arm on, this nut wouldn't even go on because it was hitting the front or hitting the cross member, but this one went on no problem. So we got concerned that our cross member was in crooked, but actually the old cross member that's been welded in here is the one that's in crooked, about 3/4 of an inch further back on this side. This kind of threw us off, and we started measuring like crazy, because if this front end's the least bit out of square, the car's going to kind of crab walk down the road. So we went and started measuring and looking and measuring different distances and everything. Everything is square. So that was the conclusion we came to, and that's why Dad went ahead and started welding up this cross member this morning, is he was able to find that everything is square, everything's good. But I'll tell you, when you first look at that, it kind of throws you off. So now I got the torch out. We got the rack mocked up kind of in place here where we wanted it. and then use these to mark out what we wanted to cut. Got the torch and cut it out. He's gonna grind those, get them cleaned up a little, and then get these bad guys tacked in place. And then that'll have that just about ready. Those are tacked in, and then weld everything up, mount the rack up to where everything's good. Then we can put the front suspension back on it, put the control arms and everything back on it. This thing will be ready to go back in the floor. Dad's getting these guys tacked in place now. Get them started. He ground that. Now we'll be able to get that to get welded up. So after Dad got these C-notches cut, he started getting them welded in place, and we talked about it, and we wanted to add some rigidity into this. So we cut 4 triangles here that are going to go out here to the frame. They're on the cross member. They're going to kind of triangulate and kind of stiffen this up a little just to give it a little extra rigidity. These plates came with the kit, so we're going to use those. Like I said, Dad's getting the C-notches welded in place, and that will basically, once we do that, go ahead and weld up all the boxings and stuff. The only thing that we have left is cutting. We got to cut some flanges here to replace the flanges that we cut off because they were so eat up from wherever they had hacked and cut on them in the past. So we're going to cut those, kind of get those added back on both sides, and weld everything up. And we will be ready to put this thing back on the ground and basically be ready to roll it out of here. So hopefully today, this evening, we'll be able to have this thing done. You guys saw it. I got the front end put under it, all the front suspension put under this thing, and while I was doing that, Dad was over there making some spacers for the rack. We went to put the rack in after we put the C-notches in and realized that if we didn't space that out a little, the steering arms were going to kind of run at a pretty severe angle. So what we did, or what he did, was he made these spacers right here on both sides, got that rack evenly spaced out. And when we did that, you can see here, the steering arms are running just about straight out, which is perfect. We got those attached to the spindles and got that all together. Like I said, I got the front suspension put on. The rack's bolted up. We're ready to throw the wheels and tires on the front of this thing and get it back on the ground. It'll be done. I mean, we're done. Dad has spent like an all-day marathon of welding, basically. He spent just welding like crazy. All of this stuff, got everything welded up. You guys have seen him weld a ton in these past 2 videos, I think. Just to show it though, we did get this where we made that cut for the frame. We got that boxed on each side, and we also got it under it here. So you can see the plate we run under it, and where we had cut the flange off of the frame, we put another plate in there and extended it out to here and run it this full length here. So we've made little gussets and places to kind of fill in on the frame. That's just been the majority of what this has been today. So like I said, we're gonna put the wheel tires on this thing, get it on the ground, and it'll be ready to roll out of here. I think that's pretty much going to do us. We got this thing on here. I'd say Doug's going to take it back to his house. He's going to do some work on it. He said he wanted to kind of try and do a chunk of this on his own. So he's going to take it back to his house now and, kind of continue on with this one. It's going to be a nice car, I think, when he gets done with it. There was quite a bit of work here in this. I don't think me and Dad, either one, I think we both thought we could kind of do this a little faster than what we ended up doing it. Finding the bent frame and having to kind of go back and remeasure a bunch of times, because every time we would kind of do a gut check, everything just kind of seemed to be off, right? So, and then just the ton of welding that goes into one of these things. So I think that's going to pretty much wrap us up. Doug's going to probably come pick this thing up tomorrow sometime, maybe. And if not, hopefully, maybe at some point you'll see it again. I don't know. We'll see how much he ends up doing on his own there and what we need to help him with. But if we need to help him with something, we'll do that. And you guys will probably see it then. If you haven't followed us on social media, you should do that. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all those places. Go to our online store. It's linked on pretty much everywhere. You can go pick up a t-shirt if you want. That's really helpful for us. And make sure to hit that subscribe button when it pops up in the center of the screen. That's the #1 way that you can help us. And come back each week and watch our videos. We really appreciate everybody that's done that. We'll see you guys next week.